Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Thriller podcast. Before I get to how you're doing, Mike, should we let people know we have a special guest today?
Tyler Booher is back. Thanks for joining us again for, God, who knows, the fifth time on the podcast?
Fifth or sixth. What's up, guys? How's it going?
I think you're now maybe you and Brian, like you and Brian are the two. You're neck and neck with who's been on the Thriller podcast the most. So yeah, last week as we were talking, I was like, we got to have Tyler on. And then halfway through the pod, or like when we got to the end of the pod, Mike was like, we were going for, I don't know, almost an hour, and we still hadn't gotten to our scorecard yet. And he's like, let's cut it there. Let's see if Tyler can come on next week. And we're glad you made the time to come hang out with us.
Not a problem. I had to finish up actually. Mike had texted me and I hadn't finished the newest book yet. So I actually waited until I went to a local signing close to me, actually in Cleveland. So I traveled over there to see Jack for a little bit and then got my copy from him and brought it back to Pittsburgh. So
Nice.
Nice. How was that? Tell us a little bit about it.
it was good. It was an hour event. And then within that hour, we did a little bit of Q&A with the audience. And then after that, we did the sign line and did photos and stuff. So went pretty good though. Some good questions from, a lot of the questions that the interviewer asks is rehearsed, but it's questions he gets on the regular, interviews and stuff he does each year. You can tell some of the stuff is handed to them, but the Q&A with the audience was pretty solid though.
Right.
That was a huge part of us doing the podcast because we had all these virtual tours during COVID and we just kept hearing the same questions. And all the authors would give kind of boilerplate language that they already had given in 4 other interviews. And there were a lot of times these interviewers hadn't read the book or weren't familiar with the main character or the series. And Chris and I were like, there's got to be some better content out there. And we want to bring authors on after the fact. So I haven't done it yet, Chris, but I'm going to reach out to David and see if, we can get Jack on the show and bring Brad back when his new book comes out and Kyle and Don Bentley over the next few months. And I feel like, Ty, exactly what you're saying. Some of these book tours are great, but particularly during the COVID times, we were all watching them online. They got so dry and boring. We wanted to be able to ask different questions, get into the spoilers. And I'd never heard an author really talk heavy spoilers in any other interview, except for when they're on our show. So, that's like the same angle that we like to take.
Especially, I don't know when we started. I guess we started with Kyle, right? When we had him on one time post book tour. Like we got him either late in the book tour or, it was after the book had come out. And Mike started recording these. All right, we're going to record like essentially 2 pods, right? One where we do the pre-pod stuff we were able to do before the book came out. And then we actually pre-recorded the spoiler section where we actually got to ask him questions. And that was the more fun part. And he actually had fun talking about it because he was saying that, I write the book and I rarely get to talk about it. And even recently with Connor Sullivan, right? He's like, we talked to him about Sleeping Bear, which at the time he had wrote a long time ago. And it was like, oh, this is fun to like actually go back and think about what I wrote because I'm so far removed from it, especially, by the time we get it, they've dropped it off, I don't know, 6 months, couple months before that. And then by the time we get to read it, it's even further on out. So I much prefer talking to them about actual nitty gritty, not like nitpicky stuff, but like actual plot details. We can go into that. Why did you do this? Why did you kill that character? As opposed to what do you got in store for us this time?
Yep. Exactly. Well, that being said, Ty, why don't you take us into your first reaction? What'd you think when you first got the book, opened the book, read the little author's note in the very beginning, and jumped into that incredible prologue and first chapter?
Yeah, I felt the same way that we had discussed in previous ones. That I didn't really care too much about the prologue. I want to know what was going on with Reece. And it happened with the other, the last few books as well. And at a certain point in the story, I wish I had more of the prologue. But when I'm reading the prologue for the first time, for some reason, I typically just want to get back to where the cliffhanger had happened. and they kind of make you wait a little bit. But I like the prologue. It definitely had some very big Bond vibes, some
Yep.
Fleming vibes for sure. So I really enjoyed it. I could almost like hear theme music for some of the scenes that was going on during the Cold War. So I enjoyed it a lot. I thought the author's note was good. It's always solid. Same with the epilogue is always solid too. And having just I read a little bit of it and then I listened to the rest from Ray Porter, and it's always enjoyable. That's the way I've consumed pretty much all the other ones. The first time around was with Ray Porter reading it, and then I'll go back and read them a second time. So having just done like one pass through, I thought it just general overview. I thought it was very solid, pretty polished. I think in a good way. So
Yeah, I was thinking about you with that first chapter because we had spoken about wanting to get back to Reese. And if you leave a cliffhanger like you did In the Blood,
yeah,
we better open up with that. And so I think you're right. The prologue maybe distracts a little, but chapter 1 delivers.
for sure.
Absolutely delivers in that cell. And since you mentioned Ray Porter, that scene is one of the best things I've ever heard any audiobook narrator read. When
Yeah,
we're inside Reese's head and he's got the voice speaking to him. And to hear Ray Porter do that just blows my mind. Were you satisfied once you finally got to the Reese plot line in chapter 1? And then I guess kind of the bad guys scheming in chapter 2.
absolutely. I think it was pretty satisfying. I think maybe my only letdown, like I really like the struggle, not knowing where he is and learning him learning his way around and everything like that, and the complexity of him just being imprisoned basically. I really enjoyed all that stuff. But I think him getting out, even though you eventually learn how long it was, I think maybe it was a little too easy. The
Mm.
gravity, I think, of the end of the last book is kind of like, we're good. It's okay. He can go free, even though you eventually learn who does it and has the impact on it and why. It feels like in the moment when he gets out, you realize that like Alice had a little bit to do with him getting out and everything. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
And maybe she had a little bit to do with him getting in. I feel
Yeah,
We
like
don't know.
we're left on that cliffhanger.
yeah,
I agree with you. I think he could have gone one of two ways. He could have left him in the prison longer, and we could have seen his story develop outside. But we want to see James Reece in action. Like
yeah.
I kind of I can see both sides.
I think him being in like a Gen Pop environment might have been more fun, but the seclusion and darkness is pretty awesome with the voices and stuff. But a Gen Pop scenario would have definitely been entertaining and actiony, and someone maybe has some information that, or it gives him some information that puts him on a little bit more of a route to get out or something like that. Not necessarily a breakout, but what to do when he gets out and who to go after would have been kind of cool. But I'm happy with how they did it, because once he gets out, it's like it's back to the mission, back to like party time. Where's the key for the safety deposit box? Where's
Yeah.
where's the note? He kind of picks up where he left off. And it's not that the prison time was for nothing either, because it does impact him pretty significantly, I feel.
So you would have liked Reese to have a red,
Uh,
in there with Reese, and
a little bit.
that helps spring him out or something.
Not necessarily spring him out. He can still get out the way he was in there, but I feel like, I don't know. I feel like I want more of him imprisoned. Like I feel like the gravity of him getting arrested at the end of the last book
Mm,
isn't carried over as intensely at the beginning of this one.
Yeah.
He's just in solitary confinement. You eventually learn he's in there for 90
3
days.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
which is pretty significant. But as you're reading it, you're like, obviously he's starting to either lose his shit, or he's just hearing some voices in the darkness and can't really figure out his time discrepancies and things like that. So I just think maybe the intensity of the end of the last book isn't quite carried as intense into the prison sentence.
I see it.
I think it hits, you know, reading it, because like we had the arcs, and so I listened to the first three chapters with the audiobook, and we did a pod, and then I of course, being me, I had to keep going, so then I picked up the book and I started reading, and then I guess it's like two more chapters we get back to another prison scene, and just like me reading it helped that I had like Ray Porter's like voice in my head, and I could kind of like as I was reading self narrate myself to that. But I could see how if I'm just reading it for the first time like that, that first chapter doesn't hit that hard. And I kind of agree that like maybe the intensity isn't ratcheted up like that after coming off the end of the last book. But I guess he could have gone one of two ways, you know, especially harkening back to like a James Bond movie or some sort of spy movie where he's in there, Alice sneaks in, like an AirPod or something, and is able to communicate with him. This is how you need to get out. That I
Yeah.
could see how that would be kind of cool to do. But I will say I did like getting, this inner demon idea of like meeting, seeing a little bit of a breakdown of James Reece and, seeing a little bit more of the man who he is. And because I think like the whole novel and what this 3-book arc has been about, like the connections to his father, connections to his past, we're sort of moving away. We're kind of, he brings up Lucy and Lauren like a little bit, but we're now like that far removed from them, and we're seeing a little bit different side of him. So I don't know. I like the progression of James Reece, especially like what we saw of him, being in that isolation. And I think it's like a big shock. Like he's like, holy shit! Like I was in there 3 months. Like that when I read that line, I was like, wow.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think to the reader, you don't expect him to be in there that long. Just the way it's written, you kind of have a little bit of an idea. He says his hair is down to his shoulders and his beard's
Right.
super long and stuff. But yeah, it is a little bit of a shock. I like his behavior and everything when he gets out. And I thought that the chapters with Katie surprising him at the hotel and everything was pretty, spot on and well written and,
Spicy.
pretty entertaining. Yeah. Just for being, you know, some spicy chapters, it was actually pretty entertaining and like the dialogue felt natural. I felt like the dialogue felt pretty genuine. So I like I think his dialogue and the back and forth between characters and his action is super polished. Like I've never read action as
Yeah.
polished as this. Like I can imagine it so well, especially jujitsu stuff. The way it's described. And actually he talked about that a little bit. That was probably the most interesting thing he said at the event that I attended was that he has a friend, can't recall if he's an army guy or a Navy guy. He's either, I don't know if he's a CAG operator or a SEAL, but him and his wife, basically Jack will send them a description of what he wants done. And this husband and wife film the action sequence on their phones or cameras and send it to Jack. And he writes it out in more detail. He like slow motions it and we'll type it out. So that's how
That's
he
sick.
gets his
That's
action
cool.
sequences so well. So he'll basically say like, okay, hand to hand combat, hatchet comes out, hatchet to head, and then they'll film it and he'll do all their details and stuff on the pages, which is pretty cool detail, I thought.
It was since you brought up that's really cool. And since you brought up the action, I feel like Jack leveled up here. I haven't, and Chris, you mentioned this in one of our earlier episodes. You asked, has he written action this consistent, this gripping, and this often since Terminalist? And at the time, I said I think Savage Son matched the action. So I said this is definitely his best action writing since Savage Son. I might even go back and say, in terms of consistency, start to finish, and how hard these action scenes hit, whether we're in the bank, in the first third or so, the sauna in that second third, or the nuke scene on the yacht in Act 3. I don't know, man. I might actually take you up on that, Chris, and say, yeah, this might be the best written action sequence, start to finish, that he's done since Terminalist. I might actually bump it up above Savage Son, just because Savage Son, the only ones I could really recall that were pure thriller was the hunting in the woods on Kamchatka Peninsula.
Right.
There were a few other things sprinkled in for sure, but it kept coming back to that one setting where here we're in a bank, we're in a sauna, we're on a boat in the Mediterranean. I feel like he's doing something different here that just hits so hard.
The one that stands out to me from In the Blood is the meat locker fight.
That
Right.
too. Oh yeah.
Right.
Really stands out. Super well described. And he talked about that as well. He said, he felt like the Devil's Hand was a little weak, and he thinks, he started writing for the Amazon show around, shortly after that. And he thinks the screenwriting and things for the Amazon show has helped him
Hmm.
change a little bit for the books in some ways. But I know we had discussed that offline before. So, but I was curious to see. I know you guys both ragged on the cover originally, and I was curious if you guys still feel that way or not, because I do not. I like the cover now, especially because the Winkler tomahawk is a 1-to-1 scale.
I love the cover from the beginning. I don't remember what you speak of. We might have picked our nits as we tend to do, but no, I think from the jump, I love this one. And then we like to judge a cover by the book. If you're judging this by the book, it's perfect. I mean, I'll give it even more of a shout because
Yeah.
the angle, we feel like we're in the water, and that happens. Reece uses the water.
Maybe it was Chris then said it felt too much like a romance novel, I think.
He
I
did. That's a
so
quote.
I did. All right, you caught me. But I will say, after reading the book, and like, we're big fans about, you have the book cover, I believe, has to mean something to the novel, or it can't just be some generic bullshit, or it can't just be something that has I'll never forget the snow train in a mid-trap novel where there was no snow, there was no train. But I digress. Um,
Oh my
no, this, this
God.
this cover is awesome, and now that we know that that's obviously off the coast of Tel Aviv, and like the emotional impact of the final scene, or it's not even the final scene, but the climax of the story on the
Yeah.
boat with the tomahawk, the cover's amazing. Yeah, no, I take back my words.
I really enjoyed every setting we ended up going to, especially Colorado, with the
Yeah,
safe house with Poe's house for some reason. And, just when you think everything about Reece and his backstory,
yeah, you
learning
don't.
how he spent his childhood there with Thomas is pretty significant, and it just like cements a even better foundation for him prior to the terminal list that you didn't know, but now like it makes more sense. It has more genuine feel to it. And what do you guys think? I'm really happy with how much we learned about James's dad in this novel.
This was a Tom Reese story, and I think it was a brilliant move because Chris talked about how he thinks this book is going to bring some finality and closure to a lot, and I think the payoff was there because we've gotten hints about Tom Reese. He's been speaking to James in the last few books, as a ghost. And I think to actually write him on the page doing some stuff in his day, I call it the Poe and Stowe storyline, I think was perfectly done. It was the right time for it. And I will say this is a Tom Reese story.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as it's a James Reese story, it's also a Tom Reese story. And I think it was a perfect time in the series to do that. And then even thinking to the prologue, man, the way I think Martha Stowe is describing Tom Reese, we even get some really like chilling language. Actually, I wrote this one down. She says, quote, "She took stock of the man across the table. He wasn't smiling. The eyes weren't so much cold as they were perceptive and alert, penetrating. She had not seen eyes like that before." I just love our introduction to actually seeing Tom operate and be a CIA officer.
Yeah, I don't know why. The detail that stuck with me the most from that prologue is that he had a Mac V Sog lighter. I don't know why. That's just such a badass like image to have, that this guy at a table she doesn't know, that's somewhat intimidating, but she has the balls to talk to the way she does.
Yeah.
Just has that item. And for those of you that know the details of someone who has something like that, it makes it a little bit more significant.
I love the speakeasy. The
Yeah.
speakeasy scene
Yeah,
was just
speakeasy's
so
awesome.
cool. And they were doing SDRs to get there. She was following her husband. I thought that was perfectly done. I wanted to see spycraft in that era. We've been pining for that in a lot of different books because you can do it with, Mitch Rapp's mentor, Thomas Stansfield. You can do it in Brad Thor with the old man, or with what's Scott's uncle's name? Not real uncle, but Gary Lawler. Like, we wanted to see that, and we got a few glimpses of Tom Reese doing that in the Cold War era, and then it was tied into the Vietnam stuff, and I thought it was perfectly done.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only thing that could have made it a little bit better is that James has his dad's shotgun. I wish that would have
Came into
made
play.
debut into
Yeah.
taking
Yeah.
somebody out. But
Yeah.
no, I thought it was good, and I agree. I was going to ask Chris what he thought. I think if we would have waited another book to have a Thomas Reese focused story, it would have been a little burnt out or too late. If we just like ended up with another Thomas Reese cliffhanger in this one, like he
Yes.
found the safety deposit box at the end, you're like, Jesus, come on. Like, we've been getting a cliffhanger about Thomas Reese for the last
Yep.
3 or 4. But I love all the detail. And I think that there's a lot more. Like we think that, this is definitely a Thomas Reese focused story, but there is a ton of uncovered items.
Well, we might want to. I mean, maybe this could be a next arc because I feel like we've had 6 books. That's 2 trilogies in a sense, loosely saying. What if James starts planting these seeds? And, who knows if it will ever be for a child of his own or someone else who's picking up the mantle of the work that needs to be done and what needs to be put in to keep America dominant in the next, couple decades and century. What if James starts planting some of these seeds, leaving notes, leaving safety deposits, or having some some stash stuff like these documents he uncovered? Like,
Yeah.
we know he sent them to the news outlets, or at least he said he did. And maybe that was a hedge. We don't know. But I want to see him trying to plant seeds that are going to have a payoff now, 2-3 books down the line. His father planted the seeds. They saved him.
Yeah.
How is he doing that and planning ahead for future threats that we can't even see yet, but that Alice might be able to help him see?
Yeah. I really like characters that are a step ahead of the competition. And, those type of twists for me are more enjoyable than betrayal twists and who done it's or, identity reveals. I really like when a character, unbeknownst to you, is a step ahead of the competition, especially, a main character or someone like in Rafe's position that's a friend character and just, planning ahead and it pays off. That those types of reveals are more satisfying, I think. And speaking of Rafe, I think for being this secondary badass of this novel, I think that I think he really shines in Savage Son the most. But in this one, I think he plays his part pretty well. And I love Ray Porter doing the South African accent and stuff, and really differentiating his character that way. And especially with Rafe at the end as well, the person that
Yeah.
he's talking to,
He goes
notices the
after
South
that,
African.
the German spy. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
If Savage Son was like his coming out story, this is his, sophomore year, like he's really becoming the true, just to go back to our roots, the Scott Hart, it's not Scott Harvick,
Scott
the
Coleman.
Scott Coleman to the Mitch Rapp, or whoever Scott's daily, Bookley sidekick is. But yeah, I think, sort of piggyback on what both of you guys said. I think if we didn't have this closure with Tom Reese, I would have just felt like it. Is he ever? It's never going to be solved. It's like it's just always going to be pushed and pushed and pushed. It's like a never ending thing. I'm interested to see. Do we fully trust Alice? Is he going to start trying to plant ways to subvert Alice? Or contingency plans to go against her? Does he? I personally don't fully trust Alice. Yeah, and I think we sort of said it. I think I said it last time, but the writing in this has really was taken up a level, and I think it shines in the action, it shines in the plot, it shines in the dialogue. So,
Yeah.
I think while that's true, and I've seen a few other people post this, Ty, I want to get your thoughts on it. The exposition at times was a little long-winded. We commented on it briefly in our episodes. It wasn't enough to, totally drop our scores very heavily, as we'll see in a minute. It wasn't enough to really complain or take away from how good this book is. But I felt there were some times we could trim the fat, whether it's going into stuff about the POWs back in Vietnam or
I like that stuff. I didn't like the stock. I didn't like the financial
okay, maybe the economics.
Stuff.
Yeah, the economics lesson though. I feel like that did not need to be what I think. I didn't count. It might be the longest chapter in the book, or unfortunately, it felt the longest.
I think there's a little fat, but not much. And what I think why I think it should be left in, and that I'm happy it is he does a really good job at wrapping fiction and nonfiction historical events together.
Yeah.
And if you look in there, there's a lot of nonfiction historical events that take place, and so him wrapping those things together, I think, is a little bit needed to make it feel a little bit more grounded. Because if not, he's just gonna turn this character into another, airport thriller novel
Yeah.
main character, I think, and keeping it grounded is pretty important. Something else he had talked about was that these books are on. He's done a 2-book deal every time, so this is the last book for this third deal with Simon and Schuster, and he's doing that nonfiction series as well, and that's going to be an every 2-year release for that series, which I think that book's coming out next year, his first one for that series. And I don't know if we're going to see. I don't think we'll see an end to James Reece anytime soon, but I think James Reece might be on an every 2-year theme maybe coming up, and someone else might be filling in either a Rafe Hastings or a Thomas Reese, Vietnam era spy thriller.
Are you breaking news right now? Do you have any
I'm not
insider
breaking.
information?
I am not breaking shit, Chris. I'm just
Okay.
speculating. So
All
no,
right. You
whenever
know,
every time I see Jack, all we talk about is Land Cruisers. So we never
okay.
really talk about anything fun like book release stuff. But I do know that the nonfiction series is scheduled for an every 2-year release, which I'm looking forward to.
You know, I is it bad of me to say I wouldn't mind that? To take more time for these novels. Sometimes I feel, maybe I'm the only one on this island, but we've been covering 2 book series now that have 21 books, and while I've enjoyed most of them, some of them I feel like could have spent a little more time in the oven. And I understand that these it's all capitalism, right? So it's driven by book sales, it's driven by you know, like, and I hate to say it, maybe this is why Kyle's getting out of the game because there's this pressure, expectation. You do one book, and then literally they take a week off, and they gotta have the draft of the next one. And I guess the great writers, I don't know. Name me one series where every single book has hit. Mike, do you know one in this genre?
No, but I would guarantee what you're saying. It wouldn't be one where the book comes out every year.
Yeah.
You're right.
So
It wouldn't. If it were to happen, it can't be a book every year that goes 15, 20, 25, I don't think it's a recipe for success with the art. It's a recipe for money and profit, but not for success with an artist, because that's what an author is, doing their craft.
you get more and more of these authors that are doing 3 books a year, or 3 different series, and like and yeah, he's able to produce them, but
Well, there it is. I'm the closest I could think of right now from what I've read in the last year or two is Andrews and Wilson. And I think a big part of that is they didn't have to come up with a tier 1 book every single year.
they're jumping
They
around.
can do them
Yeah.
when they had the story to tell and when it made sense. And then they could work on Sons of Valor. We're not going to write a Dempsey book this year or a couple of years. We're going to write a Sons of Valor book. And there's only 2, and they're amazing. The same thing with their Shepherd series. I kind of feel their Shepherd series is getting so much steam it might become that annual release, but I don't think we got 3 books. I don't think they were back to back to back. And if they were, it didn't feel like it. It wasn't this pressure of like, their book comes out every July, Brad Thor, or their book comes out every September, Mitch Rapp. There wasn't that pressure. And they're navigating a bunch of things. And now I think they're even getting into the Clancy verse. So they have so much on their plates, but I think they've navigated that not in this corporate, here's your deadline, this one book has to be at this time, but more what artistically did they want to work on and produce at that time. And I hope they can keep that alive with how much shit they have going on. But I think you're right in saying the authors who don't do this formulaic model get a deal. Publisher says this date you need this thing, but instead can write the stories they want to write. You get a better product. And in the long run, that better product is going to make you more money because people like it more.
Yeah.
Or so we'd hope.
I have a feeling that Jack has a Thomas Reese story either semi done or already done, and just is waiting for the right time to let it out. And I think this nonfiction series he said was originally slated for a yearly release, and then he started really digging in to the material with a subject matter expert, and he's like, "Yeah, this isn't going to happen every year." So, I think what they'll do is a nonfiction one every other year, a James Reece one every other year, and then a mix in of a spinoff, like one Rafe Hastings book, one Thomas Reese book, and then I don't see those ones really becoming their own series, but it's anything's possible. I mean, those characters have huge followings.
Yeah. And I could see, I would love, now we know that Poe is a bad guy and we've seen his downfall, but there's still a lot of meat in the bones, his interactions with Tom.
Yeah.
Can you see where the betrayal is? Obviously at one point they were somewhat friends, and like you could do a lot with that. So
Yeah.
Correction, Andrews Wilson did come out with the Shepherd series every year and Sons of Valor in back-to-back years, but
I mean, but that's two authors. They're two authors, right? So
they're co-authors. So they're doing something different. So that right there breaks the mold, right? I think you're getting a better product because they're tag teaming and breaking the mold. They might be able to come out with it every year, but they have some sort of process that works differently than, I think, just crank out the book, deadline, start the next one, crank out the book, deadline, publish, start the next one. I want to see more authors break the mold.
I've never read those series, so do you guys feel like when you read them you can feel and sense when one of them is in charge of a chapter and another person's in charge of another one? Like, does it feel very continuous or does it feel like a little choppy?
They're so smooth.
Cool.
And
That's
I've
good.
asked them this, and every interview they do, they get asked, tell us about the process of co-writing. They have some magic. They got the secret sauce. I don't know what it is, but their books just work. They're just awesome
Good.
dudes. Yeah, it works. I think you'd love both Tier 1 and Sons of Valor, but I would start with Sons of Valor.
Yeah, I have tier one. Yeah, I have tier one. I'll grab Sons of Valor and throw it on my bookshelf. I don't know if you've seen or not what my bookshelf looks like, but I have a lot of shit going on that thing.
I believe it.
I think, but the way they explained it is like by the time it ends up, because they go back and forth so many times that you can't even like parse like who wrote which part of each sentence. It just becomes their co-voice, So
That's awesome.
do we want to get into the scorecard, guys?
Let's do it. That's what we're here for. Everything else was prologue. Let's kick it off with some action. Tyler, you're our guest. Give us your action score out of 10. How do you think this one held up?
It's a 10.
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's
Yes,
it's
sir.
straight tense. If
Agreed.
anyone didn't give it a 10, we would have them fighting words. All right. I guess the question is, which is your favorite action scene?
Honestly, I think the bank and right after the bank for some reason I really like in the bank bathroom. Then he goes to use the copier. I just imagine in my head him walking across the street, jumping in the back of the SUV, and
Waving?
it's shaking.
Yes.
And like someone else opens the door and gets dragged in, and like the windows are just getting sprayed with blood, and it's shaking again. And like another guy walking up to there and getting fucking yanked in,
Yep.
and just this car just eating people because he's in there just tearing it up.
Could you imagine like filming that scene where you have a camera that's outside and you just see like the movement and then you cut back to it like what's actually going on inside and then you cut back and it's like to have that juxtaposition.
And you play with the sound. Like the Gray Man
Yes.
did
Oh,
that,
for sure.
where when you're on the outside, the song is reduced, the decibel
Right.
level is so
Yeah.
low.
Right.
And then when you cut back inside, it just blasts you with the jarring music. That'd be super
Yeah.
cool.
What about you, Mike? What's your favorite action scene?
Well, we were talking about it last time. And so, yeah, if Ty said the bank, we know you said the yacht and the nuke. You drove a hard bargain. I thought your reasoning there was so good. I came around and I agreed with you. But when I first read it, I would have said the sauna scene. So I think we're all
Yeah.
taking a different bent here. When he improvises with the sauna rock in the towel, one of my favorite improvised weapons he's ever used. And he's had some good ones.
I see. I was going to take you as a zip tie gun to the nuts kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think that was more interrogation scene, less of an action sequence. But yeah.
And while it's a good one, I still think the Savage Son interrogation scene, that's the one with the peppers, I think, right? The pepper scenes.
Oh, yes.
That's the best one.
The
That's the best one.
The capsaicin. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Which was also in Senator Thorne's cabin. That was a
Yes.
different cabin.
Yep.
But he does the same thing here on that ranch in upstate New York. Actually, Ashokan.
Yeah.
We actually went there on a few Boy Scout trips, and I was thinking, man, if when we were camping and James Reece was doing that like a couple 100 yards away in the woods, that'd be nasty.
That's funny.
Well, plot. What'd you think about the plot? How did it develop? And this one also gets 10 points. So, Tyler, what do you say?
I think mainly because of the Thomas Reese connections, him finally unraveling his father's breadcrumbs, essentially. I give it like an 8.
Okay.
I think like the gravity of finally getting rid of these cliffhangers from the last couple novels is like a huge payoff and done really well. But I think the only thing holding it up is maybe the bad guys.
So I was going to go higher than that. I was going to go a 9. And the one point I'm dinging for it is some of those chapters that might get referenced where, especially in the beginning, we were getting a lot from like the Russians' point of view, like them pretty much just telling us their entire, what they were going to do. There was no mystery to
Their
to it at
monologue.
all. But like I liked when they cut to, and we never like, I guess we found out that the guy died, but like the truck driver who drove the uranium, across the border into Iran and took it back. And like you could have just had like those kind of things and forced us to kind of piece it together a little bit. And then like, some of the stuff that his interactions with, literally break down what the Russians were doing with Dan Reb and Rafe. But besides that, I liked the payoffs. I liked the Tom Reese stuff. I liked, the scenes in the prison. I liked the Poe and like flash forwarding with the Stowe character, Martha Stowe character. So yeah, I gotta give it a 9.
I think I'm going to settle right in between you two fellas then with an 8.5. I originally was going to go as high as a 9. I think the way you developed Poe and Stowe and brought in Tom Reese, like you're saying, Tyler, was perfect. Really well done. The exposition, I gotta say, it was just a little unbalanced. It took you out of the plot at times, mainly the economics lesson. Let's table that at this point. But
yeah,
we said what needed to be said there. But just a couple other pieces of exposition. I know I agree with you guys. I love the faction, what's real, what's not, the historical tie-ins. I'm a big fan of that. But I think how and when they were placed just could have used some tweaking. So I'm going to go 8.5. Though I could bump that up to a 9 with some convincing. So I'm right there. I'm on the cusp.
I think other than the German and Poe, which we don't obviously know till the reveal, I really think the bad guys are kind of weak. I mean, we have the one-eyed guy that's a continuous bad guy for a little bit, but I really like the German. I wish there was actually maybe a little bit more with him. I could have seen the Russians coming after him and then him trying to maybe help James or have James save his ass because he can see what he can do. But I like the German character. I hope he makes a reappearance later on down the road, which I think he will. So.
I think he will. Yeah, Rafe wants to hire him.
Yeah.
I saw him. You remind me, you have not read the Mid-Trap series?
I have not.
Yeah. So there's this one character, his name's Grisha, and he's like originally a foe and becomes an ally. So I could see this guy potentially becoming something like that.
Yeah.
Really intrigued by him. But, besides him, I guess, we have the two bumbling idiots, the Russians, trying to, with Putin and their, is it Putin? Does he say Putin? Or that was the other
he says
novel?
the president.
The Russian president. Yeah. And then, we have like the other, the Russian mafia, but none of them like really stood out that much. So I went as low as a 3. So the bad guys are out of 5. So
I brought it down as well for those reasons. Dashkov and Levitsky, the way their feud and their battle and jockeying for power in the inner circle, I thought was a really neat idea, but it wasn't developed. It was almost half baked.
No.
Every
Levitsky
time
was killed off book, right? Essentially, we get a line that he was shot in a park,
and he also just kept screwing up. He never did anything right. Where I would expect he's gonna one up Dashkov or he's gonna have more influence.
Yeah,
I guess Levitsky I just thought could have been a little more intimidating.
He got whacked like some bum with no name tag on.
Nothing,
just shot in the park.
Yeah,
it's a very Russian thing though. But yeah. So I went 3.5 there on the bad guys. What did you say your score was there, Tyler?
Probably 3 for bad guys. I think they might be the weakest part of the book. I think maybe if like we just had one more good recurring bad guy that was either mentally or physically on James's level. In other novels, we either have one that's mentally on the same level or physically on the same level.
Yeah.
They're never wrapped up in the same person. That's why he's like the best of both worlds. And I think if we had somebody like that, I think the German was mentally or strategically on that level, for strategy or, history or combat,
But he
but
wasn't there long enough. Yeah.
yeah. He waited on the corner and his
Man
Russian
die.
buddies get
Yeah.
slayed.
Like a Nizar Katan, someone like that to play that
Yeah.
role.
We
Yeah.
we also follow at one point that Wagner group acolyte, who's rising through the ranks. Like we get his backstory too about his mom who was a prostitute,
Yeah.
and the reason he like is what he is because he killed like some guy who was beating his mom, and like I thought like he was going to become like this adversary, and then but then they also bring in the leader of the Wagner group, and he's like this supposed to be the scary guy. Honestly, maybe you could argue there was too many villains in here, not enough depth or interactions into one of them. I will say the kills where he's like after once he hooks up with the Israelis and goes to takes out Dashkov and the Wagner group guy with the car. Those are pretty cool. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a little too much bloat.
That's right. You had a
Yeah.
car chase, Tyler. You're a car guy.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
I thought it was awesome. It was pretty well written. I like the motorcycle guys as well. There at the bank, he comes out and doesn't see the bikes and thinks that they're circling basically. And I also like the German's bluff. He doesn't have anybody after Katie or Rafe really. I don't know, that adds something to his character a little bit likable. That he was able to bluff his way out of that, and that James does not have a poker face, and that he totally bought into it.
Right, right.
I also really love the scene at the bank with he gets the stiletto knife and puts it to work. So
Oh, from his dad. Yeah.
yeah,
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I guess maybe this can go to buy-in perhaps next. We'll get to the good guys, but I think we're on buy-in here, and things like the package. He actually finds the package from his father. He opens it up. Did you feel that paid off? Did that satisfy you when he's going through these weapons, the old knife, a couple other things from his early CIA days, and the letter? Did all that pay off for you? Because it's been building so much.
yeah. I think it did. The letter and the knife, and there's an axe in there, or an old tomahawk from Vietnam. I think those items specifically, but actually the item that the actual main story is about, the list. I really think if it was just the list, I think it may not have paid off as well. And I do like that Thomas had a list, just like James had. It just gives them something else in common.
Right, right.
I know that's kind of like the theme of like a couple of the books, obviously, but I really like that. And he's gonna finish his dad's list basically. So we'll see if that comes to fruition in the next novel at all. But I really liked that he's all about ancient forms of combat, and his dad hands him a couple of tools from ancient forms of combat, and they're really helpful at the perfect time. So
How about this one? The fact that everything he was doing to, one, compile that list, and two, track down the POWs and the stories of the POWs to hopefully get justice for what we did by abandoning them. Did you feel that having Poe playing Tom Reese was a good payoff? The fact that Poe was essentially distracting him with that to keep him from doing his research on the collective and getting the links to the collective. Did you buy that whole piece? That subterfuge there?
yeah, I do, because he even says at the end, I kept Thomas Reese busy for 20 years with that.
It worked.
And while it kept him busy for 20 years, it wasn't for nothing. I think that you'll learn some more things about Thomas Reese, and you'll see that there's been some extreme success out of that venture. And I think that led to him compiling this list. So while he was still doing research on the collective publicly and to Poe's eyes, I think he was doing the POW thing, which Poe thinks he distracted him with that, but I think really that's gonna lead somewhere else to where it kind of did him in, actually. So while, like I said, I like whenever characters are a step ahead. So Thomas does not seem like the type of person that can be fooled by
No.
Poe while they share friendship, I think he may have been a little bit weary. So
Tom had an ace in the hole against Poe.
I'm
Maybe
hoping so. See, I like to see characters succeed, but not too easily like that. And we'll see.
playing the long game.
Intriguing.
So what does
Yeah.
that mean for a buy-in score out of 5? We talked action, we talked plot, we talked about these villains, the Tom Reese stuff. Overall, how bought in were you to this book, start to finish?
Out of 5,
Yep.
I'm gonna say 4. I think bad guys is the only thing holding it back. Setting, action, like description, as far as like describing the action and stuff for me is like the gold ticket for this book. Really, like I said, it's so polished. Dialogue was great. All the characters that we already know are there. The new characters that get introduced are well enough described in other than the economics lesson, they're described in a short enough amount of time and make sense. There was what was that was it In the Blood? There was no, I'm sorry, Devil's Hand. I think there was a character that gets introduced in like the third quarter, and he like just throws all the information for this mole at you in one chapter, and like
Right.
you had
I
not
remember
heard
that.
about him
Right.
prior. I think that this was a lot more sprinkled throughout nicely rather than just like lopping everything at you for this one mole.
And the prologue establishes that by
Yeah.
doing the Poe and Stowe stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
So what I'm hearing is you're going 5 on the good guys then. Come on, it's got to be. We got Tom,
Yeah.
we got Rafe, we got Dan Reb, we got Vic, a little bit of Alice. Like, you going
Yeah.
5?
Yeah, 5 for good guys, I think, for sure.
I think we're
But,
all on the same page.
If we
Yeah.
think back, as good as this is, like for me, Savage Son is still number 1, and I think it's because the bad guys in Savage Son are so great.
Yeah.
And the bad guys are great in Terminalist too. And I really think they're built around these ways that Jack wanted to kill them off, which I know, Chris, you had talked about before. But the bad guys in Savage Son are so good. I think if we have like another batch of bad guys that are memorable and are driven and have that kind of dialogue and feel like real people rather than a couple of older guys that are in the hierarchy fighting over power, I think it might, have upped it a little bit. We just needed a couple of them, a couple guys like the German that were a little bit more bad than how the German was, I think.
Or tweaked some of the Russian, the Dashkov and the Levitsky plot line. Maybe had a little more scenes with Levitsky by himself than just always from Dashkov's point of view.
Yeah.
So you mentioned setting. I think this book is pretty strong at setting. I think we go to places, we get a lot of good descriptions. Nothing feels out of place. Everything like has its meaning. So I said a 4.5. I don't know what I could give it a 5 too. I don't know why I really have anything to super nitpick about it. I guess one thing with buy-in, I gave it a 4.5. The one thing I was like holding up on is just, or not holding up on. One thing I think like, boosted is that I actually believe, the motivations behind sort of all the exposition we got from the Russian point of view. I believed it. I believed like why they would be doing certain things, why they would want to start this war with Israel and Iran and stuff like that.
Yeah,
That would draw
to get us
people
out of
in.
Ukraine. Yeah.
And then allow like China to go after Taiwan and create this global new axis and versus allies. So the root story of the plot, like what is trying to be stopped, I was 100% bought in on that too. So
yeah, that's why I went 4.5 as well. I kind of forgot about that stuff, but when it's being explained to you, you're so into it. It's like I'm reading, some geopolitics magazine or a blog post by someone who knows what the hell they're talking about. So I love those scenes when they're happening. They're a little less memorable when you get to the action. You kind of forget that was all built up as the backdrop, but
right.
Yeah, it's still there and it's still really good as you're reading it. 4.5 for buy-in on me too. All right, guys, that just leaves the setting, the cover, and the free space. Setting, you said you liked it, Tyler. What are you gonna actually give it out of 5?
I'll give it a 5. I really like all the set pieces. All of the action pieces are great. The 3 big ones we talked about, and even the non-action pieces. The hotel after he gets out, even though it's pitch black, him in solitary confinement is interesting and not like super boring because of the dialogue, especially when Ray Porter's reading it.
Yeah, we go a lot of places like that you're
Yeah,
talking about. Like we go everywhere.
I believe Poe's place is in Colorado. That place really stands out to me, like the bank fight, and then Poe's place, like how it's described, just being like a cabin that's a safe house in the middle of the woods and somewhere he spent some of his childhood. You know, a lot of the background details of him and Thomas being there stood out to me. I really like Poe's place with the, you know, the two dogs and stuff.
Yep.
But yeah, we go a lot of places. The yacht's great.
The sauna.
Yeah,
I feel like
the
you're moving through the
Sauna.
hallways.
Yeah, sauna
The
is
changing
awesome.
room into the sauna. Absolutely.
the description of like that Russian what was this, the secret city, like the depiction of the, like
Oh,
the
that too.
description of that, the description of like Martha's Vineyard back in the day, like in the
Yeah,
prologue, like he's every place we go, it felt tactile, it felt real.
yeah. Even in DC, the stuff in DC at the end and in the epilogue is pretty awesome too.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
I think you convinced me of the 5. I'm going to give it half a point. I went 4.5. I'm going to the 5.
Mike is so easy to persuade.
Yep, he is.
When you
You
make a good
realize
argument,
this.
man, I'm going to listen. When you tell the truth, when you speak truth, I'm going to listen to it. You guys want to do your free space? Give us your winner, and then we can wrap up with some cover talk. What do you think?
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Or we
yeah,
already
Chris.
talked the cover. We talked the cover a little bit, so you want to just say your score because we already broke it down earlier.
Yeah, so I'm gonna guess Tyler's giving it 5, and I'm giving it a 4.5. You know, it's still got that little bit of romantic vibe, but it's higher than I initially gave it. You know, it's way higher than I initially was thinking because of how much I appreciate the boat scene, how much I love the boat scene, and the fact that it takes center stage, and the tomahawk. You know, like especially is that his dad's tomahawk? Is that the older one, or is that a new tomahawk?
I mean that one is it looks how James's looks in
Okay,
every book.
okay.
But what's really cool is on the hardback, I have one of those tomahawks from Daniel Winkler that I had made for me last year. And if I set mine on top, it's 1-to-1
It's the
scale.
actual size. That's pretty
It's
cool.
1-to-1 scale.
That's
So
cool. Yeah.
I'm gonna pick I don't want to really go too heavy into this. I love cover A, which is what we're calling the standard US release. Cover B and C, which you can't see here, Tyler, but if you just Google up the international versions,
Yeah, so that's why I'm giving it a 4.5 because the other covers
yeah,
are pretty grabby.
I went down to 4 on it because one of them has the Kremlin all like glitz and glamour. It almost looks like Disney World Kremlin style. I'm like, or St. Basil's. I'm like, not enough of this book happens in Moscow and Red Square. Why would you highlight the Levitsky Dashkov stuff over some other scenes? Like, I'd much rather that be the yacht as it is in the US version, you know, or even the sauna or the speakeasy in New York, something else besides the Russian plot line to put on your cover. And then cover C, which I don't even know which one this is, maybe the Australian release. I think I actually saw our buddy David, shout out to David, Thriller fan. I think I saw him publish or post a copy of this one from Down Under. I don't get the tunnel. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
And we
yeah.
got a running man. I don't like
yeah.
B and C having the silhouette. It almost looks like they're just floating. Like, you know, you just copy and pasted some silhouette like Ryan Steck's, you know, logo for the Real Book Spy, and you just copy and pasted them into these cartoonish looking Disneyland scenes of a tunnel and a castle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
I
gonna put
don't
them in the chat for you.
yeah, I'm looking at them right now actually.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't get the tunnel, and I see what you're saying by the Disney stuff. You know, I think the US standard release is pretty good.
I'd give it a 5. I'd give it a 5 if it was just that one.
Yeah.
I would love to know what goes into people's minds into like why they need to have 3 different covers for a brand new book. I understand like when you reissue something, you know, you want to freshen it up, you know, to have a new take
Yeah,
maybe.
or trade paperback. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
exactly. The UK version of every one of these novels has like this like cut and paste thing, and I don't know. Maybe it must be like whoever they distribute the book with over there. That's how it works. But
They usually suck. I'm just going to be honest. The UK releases of most thrillers are really bad.
the weak link, yeah. All right, well, you got to get to the winners and our guest. Our guest goes first.
Winners for me is Thomas Reese is number one for sure.
Yes,
That's
sir.
a good
For
one.
sure. Just getting a lot of his background and things that he worked on in his career, and you get some payoffs. And while I still feel like there's some cliffhangers in this, it it closed the book on like stuff you've been wanting to know, but also like that you actually just finished the chapter for Thomas Reese. I think that you still got a whole book to go for him and his history and stuff. So he's the winner for me for this one.
That's a good one. I think we could all have put that one. I'll
Yeah.
slightly shift it a little bit. I'm going to do learning how to trade options and derivatives on the stock market. Oh, never mind. No, I'm going to say the prologue in chapter 1. That just set the stage for me that this book was going to be a banger. And because it had Tom Reese early on, I love the Stowe characters and the scene on the dock. And if that prologue was just a one-off and we didn't hear anything else about, Newport and the dock and how they were shot, I would have been fine. But the fact that we later come back to it and hear Tom Reese saved Martha Stowe.
Yeah. And shot the assassin.
Exactly. He shot the assassin long range.
Long range, yeah.
Yeah, with a pistol. I just thought the way that was handled was top notch. That's up there with like Le Carré stuff and some of the greats. To me, if you can isolate those parts of the writing in this book, you're a world-class novelist in that. So I think Poe and Stowe, the opening scene, and even combining that with James Reece in prison, I would give the shout out to Ray Porter there as well. The fact how Ray Porter nails prologue into chapter 1 is just a phenomenal firecracker of a start to this book.
All right, my winner's got to be truth. Truth and consequence.
Truth and consequence.
So honestly, the real winner is the action in this novel. And I think I got to give it to Jack Carr, like in his writing and how great, going from each of, you had one in each quarter of the book, these very impactful. And like at the end, he mentions Rambo and his inspiration for that. And I like saw that come through in the writing and, the various action scenes and how we progressed along and just the creativity and use of weapons, use of, takeouts. I feel like whenever we were reading the action, it almost felt like the book was slowing down. And so like you were sort of but at the same time, like their actions are actually going really fast. Like that, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I don't know. Jack did a great job in this novel and I gotta give him praise. So.
Well, guys, that is good stuff. We are pretty much on par with our final scores here. Chris and I both ending up at 45.5. Tyler coming in at an even 45. Those are some solid scores on the ThrillerPod scorecard, which leads me to ask, where does this fall? We've got 6 James Reece books by Jack Carr. How does it line up? Tyler, we know you love Savage Son.
Let me just remind what Tyler said last time when we did In the Blood, right? We did this after Devil's Hands.
Yeah, we did them out of order last time.
Yeah, we did them out of order. So Savage Son, you had Savage Son 1, Terminal List, In the Blood, True Believer, Devil's Hands. We all, by the way, we all had Devil's Hands last.
Yeah. So this is like squeezing in the number 3 spot for me.
Whoa.
Okay.
So everything that was 3 and under gets knocked down, and this is going number 3.
That's solid. That's pretty high. Chris, what are you saying here?
This is going number 2.
Oh shit.
Yeah, dude, I love this book. It's Savage Son, Only the Dead, True Believer, Terminal List, In the Blood. No, I said that wrong, out of order. Savage Son, Only the Dead, True Believer, Terminal List, In the Blood, Devil's Hand.
Terminal List is still my number 2, mainly because of the impact it had on me the first time I read it. I wish I could read that book again for the first time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I'm definitely the outlier here. Not that I didn't love Terminal List, but like I just for some reason I've appreciated the other 3 more, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think you also read it later than us when or at least I read it, none of the other ones were out. I feel like by the time you had read it, you were able to then quickly jump into True Believer
Sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Savage Son. You could almost read them 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I think he marathon read those like right in a row from what I recall.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. And then I jumped ahead to, after Savage Son, I jumped ahead to In the Blood. And then I had to go
Yeah.
back and read.
The worst one.
Yeah, the worst one. Yeah.
But that makes complete sense, I think, of why Terminalist fell down your chart a little bit to 4th place now. I think because you just jumped into the others and were like, damn, like those were so good. You almost forget Terminalist, where, Tyler, I think you and I had a similar experience. That book sat with me.
Yeah.
It moved me. It really did something where I was like, this is a game changer in the Thrillerverse, and told me Jack Carr is going to be a big name moving forward. And I don't know if, Chris, you had time to sit with that and that cooked and stewed for you. You jumped right in.
I think I had the first 3 books all at the same time. Like I got into the series whenever Savage Son came out. And I think I read Terminalist twice before I jumped into True Believer.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, Terminalist still takes the cake for me. It's in the 1 spot. I'm sorry to do Savage Son dirty like that, but this might be controversial. I'm keeping True Believer in the 2nd spot. The Africa stuff and the Hastings stuff to me is still so key. With Uncle Hastings over there in Mozambique. And this is a hard call because Only the Dead is probably in a dead heat with Savage Son. Like, literally, we're in game 7, overtime, triple overtime in game 7. It's that tight, but I'm going to give it to Only the Dead. I loved this book. 3rd spot, bumping Savage Son down to the 4 spot. In the Blood, Devil's Hand, rounding out the top 6. Guys, this book made top 2 and 3 for all of us. Jack Carr super fans, and this one's in the top half of his best books. That is incredible.
Yeah, for sure.
That's saying something. That's definitely saying something. I'm interested to talk to other people and see if we're the outliers, or it's truly as good as we think it is, because I think it's great.
I think it's amazing. I've seen everything. I've seen one person post that this was their least favorite book, and they kept harping on the exposition. There's way too much exposition being told to you. And they're right in some regard, but it doesn't take away from all the other amazing things that I don't agree with that take.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, it's awesome. Love it.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on, Tyler. We got to have you on before a whole year from now. When is the Amazon series coming out?
So the Ben Edwards show should come out. That's the spin-off show. It should come out next year, and then the year after will be season 2 of Terminal List.
Oh, we have to wait like 2 more years. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So they haven't revealed the title of the Ben Edwards show yet, but they have 4 of 6 episodes in the can, which Chris Pratt's in 2 of. And then once that is wrapped up, he said right now it's on hold because of the writer's strike.
The writer's strike.
Oh, right. True.
Until that's done, then they're gonna finish that up. But he said it's looking pretty good. It's more of like a globe-trotting espionage thriller instead of like an action or revenge thriller. So looking forward to that.
Okay.
I like Taylor Kitsch, and I think Ben Edwards is one character who was better on screen than in the book. So I'm happy they're giving him a spinoff. I like Taylor Kitsch a lot. So
yeah, definitely looking forward to that. We're gonna have you back on for all of it. We definitely will, and maybe even down the road, Jack's nonfiction book. See if our listeners would be into that. But I'd love to read it and talk about it.
Yep, I am. I have two books I have in the pipe right now. Is The Spy That Came In From the Cold and Once an Eagle. Right now, it's on my shelf. I got to read it. Once an Eagle, which that book is ridiculous. It is super big.
I know you and of course Jack are always talking about that one. But when you do The Spy Who Came In From the Cold, definitely would love to chat about that one. I'm a big Le Carre fan.
Sure thing.
Mike, before you go, I'm about to hit pay on Sunday, June 4th at 12 p.m. in, where is this place in New Jersey? It's like North Vale, New Jersey. $30. Go to a Jack Carr meet and greet.
That's what I did. That's what I did.
That's
you get
his Jersey
You get a
event.
signed copy of the book.
Yeah, the $30 get you a signed copy.
Yo,
It's worth going.
It's 2 hours away. Should I do it?
You
It's worth
should.
going. I traveled 2 hours for mine. It's worth going to. I drove to Cleveland from Pittsburgh.
I was thinking of it. Someone was giving him some stick online, or David some stick about getting more. I think it was Mark, actually, our patron, getting more East Coast events on the tour. And David's like, we got New Jersey. And we're like, that's such a small slice of the East Coast. We need another one. But, dude, you should do it. I can't join you, unfortunately. But, dude, pull that trigger and do it.
Yeah, Chris, it's worth going to. And if you wait in the picture line, he'll give you a couple minutes of his time to bullshit about whatever you want to. So
you better bring him some ThrillerPod stickers, though, if you do go. I'll tell you that.
I have plenty. I have plenty. All right. Thanks, Tyler. This was great.
No problem, guys. Thanks for having me on, as always. Appreciate it.
All right, we got to thank our patrons, our special operator, Sherry F., our special agents, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Dawn, Dennis, Peggy, Catherine, Ray, Bridget, Jeff, and Mark. Thank you always to Tyler for coming on. I always love when he's on. It's a nice conversation with him. Please subscribe, rate, and review using your favorite podcasting platform. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram @thrillerpodcast. And as always, time is ticking.